This question is evil, evil. So many people have trouble with this, and it's because it looks like a geometry question. It's kind of not. I mean, I categorize it as one, but in all practice, it's not really a geometry question. So the issue here that really messes with us is that this picture makes it look like all these angles are equal. But it says the figure is not drawn to scale, so our eyes are not trustworthy here. We need to use math to prove our answer. We're still going to use angle rules to do it, but this is a good example where like showing your work, I think, really helps you move through this question. And by this I mean like no matter what idea you have, no matter how obvious it may seem to you, you should really write it down. So one thing that people, recognize here is that like with vertical angles, things like x and t are the same. And so they end up drawing this crazy like version of this picture where they show all the congruent angles. And then they do something about x plus y equals u plus w. And I'm going to keep using red because you'd only have one colored pencil if you were taking the test. So people do all sorts of crazy stuff to this picture to try to make sense of it. And this is not showing your work in a useful way. This is a mess. Your brain can't handle this. It makes no sense. So use that as a clue, right? If you see a picture that looks like this, you got to remove things from the picture. You got to picture what's going on in a different way. And they give us a clue because they tell us in algebraic terms what's happening. They give us an equation. And so maybe it would be helpful if I wrote other equations. So let me just rewrite this one. X plus y is equal to u plus w. And so what did I do with the vertical angles, meaning the angles that are opposite each other when they cross, right? So x is equal to t, y is equal to u, and z is equal to w, right? So I'm writing as equations the exact same things that I drew on my picture. It's not that drawing on the picture was a bad idea. It was a good idea. It just turned into a bad idea as we were doing it. So we adjust, we adapt. We show our work and we try to understand what's happening in whatever way we can. And in this case, now I start to see things that I don't know that I would have ever seen if I was looking at the picture. I can start to make some substitutions. I say, well, okay, if y is equal to u, well, then I can substitute u in for the y in this equation. And if I do that, look what happens. X plus u is equal to u plus w. Well, if there's a u on each side, right, they can cancel out. And so this equation really just becomes x equals w. And that's new. I didn't know that information before, right? So that's a new piece of information. Now, it's not one of my answers, but it gets us closer. Because now we can say, all right, if this piece of information is true, then my x is equal to w up here. And so that means t is equal to w as well. And if w is equal to x, then z is equal to x as well. And so I'm just going to combine all of these into one kind of mega equation here. Basically, the x and the t and the z and the w, those two separate equations have now merged together. And we have one big list of 4 letters that are all equal to the same thing. So are any of them listed here? Well, yeah, x equals z, right? X equals z, that's here and here. Y being equal to w, though? I don't see that, so that doesn't look good. But z is equal to t, well, that's here too, right? I just wrote that. Z and t, kind of double highlight z, that's also there. And so there you go. These two are true, and so B is the answer because those two are now proven to be true. It's a hard question. This is really, really difficult. But if you want to take a lesson away from it, it's this, that showing your work is helpful. We use it most of the time to avoid careless mistakes, and so that's why, we write things down. We don't do work in our head. We want to see it. But the reason we want to see it is that we are visual beings. And so when we see things on the page physically, that is usually better for our brain to handle than ideas that we hold in our head. So the idea of vertical angles here seems super obvious. We can see it on the page. Even though the picture isn't really perfect, we can still see that aspect of it. But once we write it down in another form, our brain is able to synthesize that information a little bit better with everything else going on. We may be able to see things and make connections that we weren't able to make otherwise. So showing your work is about taking the good ideas that you have and taking them out of your brain so that your brain can think about the next good idea, or so that the brain can combine two ideas that it wasn't able to kind of combine when they were just floating around in your head. It really works, and this is a strategy I absolutely use constantly in the SAT. Just writing an idea down, no matter how obvious it seems, it really helps me move a question along and see connections that I wouldn't see otherwise. So I highly recommend it. It doesn't waste time. It earns you points.